The phone rang in the middle of the night. I stared at the unknown number, my thumb hovering over the decline button. Rain hammered against the window of my one-bedroom apartment in Chicago. My 6-year-old daughter slept in the next room, clutching a worn teddy bear. The phone kept ringing. I answered. A woman's voice came through, trembling and barely above a whisper. "Ryan, it's Megan. Megan from Jefferson High. Can you come get me?" He locked the door. "I'm outside and it's raining and I don't have anywhere to go." I looked at my sleeping daughter, then at the storm outside. Earlier that evening, I had come home from a long shift fixing burst pipes in a downtown office building. My hands still smelled like copper and rust. The apartment was dark, except for the television's blue glow, where my daughter Emma had fallen asleep on the couch. Her small body curled around a teddy bear so old, its fur had worn thin in patches. I stood in the doorway for a moment, watching her breathe. She was 6 years old, and she was everything I had. I lifted her gently, careful not to wake her, and carried her to the bedroom. The apartment was small enough that 5 steps took me from the living room to her bed. I tucked the blanket around her shoulders and placed the teddy bear under her arm. She stirred slightly, murmuring something I couldn't understand, then settled back into sleep. I closed her door halfway and returned to the living room. Dirty dishes sat in the sink. A stack of bills covered one corner of the kitchen table, some of them marked with red letters I tried not to look at. Laundry spilled from a basket by the couch, waiting to be folded. I sat down heavily and pulled out my wallet. I had some cash until Friday. I did the math in my head, the same calculation I'd done 1,000 times. Rent was due soon. Emma needed new shoes because her toes were pushing against the front of her old ones. The electric bill was already a month behind. I leaned back and let my eyes close. On the wall across from me hung a drawing Emma had made in crayon. 2 stick figures holding hands inside a small house, just 2 figures, no one else. That was when the phone rang. The number was unfamiliar. My first instinct was to ignore it. Nothing good ever came from unknown calls in the middle of the night, but something made me answer anyway. The voice on the other end sent me back to high school, to a night after prom, when we'd sat on the back steps of the gym and talked until the sun came up. She'd been wearing a silver bracelet I'd bought her with weeks of lawn mowing money. We'd almost kissed that night, almost become something more. But life had other plans. She moved away that summer. I stayed. We lost touch the way young people do. Slowly and then all at once. Now her voice came through the phone, stripped of everything I remembered. No laughter, no warmth, just fear. "Can you come get me?" I was already reaching for my keys. "Where are you?" She gave me an address on the other side of the city. I wrote it on the back of an envelope, my handwriting barely legible. "I'll be there soon. Stay somewhere dry if you can." I hung up and stood in the middle of my apartment, caught between 2 impossible choices. I couldn't leave Emma alone, but I couldn't leave Megan out there either. Mrs. Henderson. The thought came to me like a lifeline. My neighbor across the hall, a retired woman who'd watched Emma many times before when my shifts ran late. I knocked on her door, apologizing for the hour, explaining only that there was an emergency. She asked no questions, just pulled on her robe and shuffled across to my apartment. I drove through streets that were empty except for the rain. My wipers could barely keep up with the downpour. At red lights, I caught myself gripping the steering wheel so hard my knuckles ached. I found her at a bus stop near her address, huddled under the small shelter that did almost nothing to block the sideways rain. She was soaked through, wearing only a thin sweater and jeans. When my headlights swept across her, I saw the bruise on her cheekbone, dark and swollen. She got into my car without a word. Water dripped from her hair onto the seats. Her hands were shaking, and not just from the cold. I pulled off my jacket and handed it to her. She wrapped it around her shoulders like armor. For several minutes, neither of us spoke. The only sounds were the rain on the roof and the rhythm of the wipers. Then Megan reached out and touched something hanging from my rearview mirror. A thin silver bracelet tarnished with age. "You still have it," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "It reminds me of simpler times." She let go of the bracelet and turned to look out the window. I'm sorry, Ryan. I didn't know who else to call. My family's gone. My friends, he made sure I lost them all. Your number was the only one I still remembered by heart. I didn't ask who he was. The bruise on her face told me enough. We pulled up to my apartment building. The rain had softened to a steady drizzle. I cut the engine but didn't move to get out. It's small, I said, staring at the building's front door. Really small, and I've got a kid, so it's not quiet, but there's still room if you need it. Megan shook her head slowly. I can't do that to you. You have your own life, your own problems. Megan, it's the middle of the night, you're bleeding. We'll figure the rest out tomorrow. She looked at me, then really looked, and something in her expression cracked open. She nodded once and followed me inside. The apartment was dark when we entered. Mrs. Henderson had dozed off in the armchair, and she woke with a start when the door opened. I thanked her quietly, promised to explain later, and walked her back across the hall. When I returned, Megan was standing in the middle of my living room, dripping onto the worn carpet. She looked lost, like she wasn't sure if she was allowed to exist in this space. A small voice came from the hallway. Daddy. Emma stood in her bedroom doorway, clutching Mr. Buttons against her chest. Her eyes were wide and fixed on the strange woman in our home. I walked over and crouched down to her level. Hey baby, why are you awake? I heard voices. Emma's gaze didn't leave Megan. Who is she? She's a friend. She needs help. I smoothed a hand over Emma's braids, the ones I'd spent time doing because the YouTube tutorial made it look easier than it was. Remember what we talked about? When someone needs help and we can help, what do? Emma thought about it, her small face serious. We help. That's my girl. Emma studied Megan for another long moment. Then she walked over, her bare feet patting softly on the carpet, and held out her teddy bear. You can borrow Mr. Buttons. He helps me when I'm sad. Megan dropped to her knees so she was at eye level with the child. Her hands trembled as she accepted the worn bear. Tears spilled down her cheeks, mixing with the rain that still clung to her skin. Thank you, sweetheart, she managed. Thank you so much. Emma nodded with the gravity of someone who understood that some things were too important for words. Then she looked up at me. She can stay, Daddy. There's room. I felt something shift in my chest, a door opening that I'd kept locked for a long time. I looked at my daughter, then at Megan, then at the tiny apartment that could barely contain 2 people, let alone 3. But Emma was right. There was room. The first few days were an exercise in careful navigation. I gave up my bed and moved to the couch, insisting that Megan take the bedroom with Emma. The apartment had never felt so small. Every morning, 3 people rotated through one bathroom. Every evening, 3 plates crowded onto a table built for 2. Megan flinched at sudden noises. The first time I dropped my keys on the counter, she jerked backwards so violently she knocked over a glass of water. She apologized over and over while cleaning it up, her hands shaking against the paper towels. I pretended not to notice. I knew that acknowledging it would only make it worse. Emma watched everything with eyes that missed nothing. She didn't ask questions about why Megan jumped at loud sounds or why she sometimes stared at the locked front door like she expected it to burst open. But I saw the way my daughter observed, processing information she was too young to fully understand. One evening, I came home from work to find Emma at the kitchen table with her crayons. She was drawing with intense concentration, her tongue poking out slightly from the corner of her mouth, the way it always did when she was focused. I looked over her shoulder at the picture. 3 stick figures inside a house shape. But the third figure, the one with long hair like Megan, stood outside a window looking in. That's a nice picture, baby, I said carefully. Can you tell me about it? Emma shrugged without looking up. It's our house, I see that, but why is she outside? My daughter finally met my eyes. I don't know if she's staying. The words hit me somewhere deep. I understood then that Emma was protecting herself, building walls around her heart before they could be broken again. Her mother had left when she was 2 years old. One morning she was there and the next she was gone. leaving behind only a worn teddy bear and a silence that I had never fully explained. Now my daughter was bracing for another departure. That night, after Emma was asleep, I sat alone in the kitchen, staring at the bills that never seemed to shrink. Rent was still due soon. My cash had dwindled after gas to get to work. Adding another person to the household meant more food, more electricity, more water. Numbers that didn't add up no matter how many times I calculated them. Megan appeared in the doorway. She'd showered and changed into clothes we'd bought at a thrift store since she'd left her home with nothing but what she was wearing. Her bruise had faded to yellow at the edges, but it was still visible in the dim light. "You should be sleeping," I said. "Can't." She sat down across from me. I saw Emma's drawing. I didn't respond. "I'm making things harder for you," Megan continued. "I can see it in those bills. I can see it in how tired you look." "I was tired before you got here." "Ryan, don't pretend this isn't a burden." I set down the bill I'd been holding. "What do you want me to say? That this is easy?" "It's not, but that doesn't mean I regret it." Megan looked down at her hands. "I need to do something. I can't just sit here and think all day. Let me help around the house at least. Cooking, cleaning, whatever. I need to be useful." I thought about arguing, about telling her she didn't owe me anything. But I recognized the desperation in her voice. It wasn't about repaying a debt. It was about feeling like she still existed, like she still had purpose. "Okay," I said, "but only if you want to." The next morning, I woke to the smell of eggs and toast. Megan was in the kitchen, moving with a quiet efficiency that suggested she'd been up for hours. Emma sat at the table, watching her with the same careful observation she'd been practicing all week. "Miss Megan makes eggs different than you, Daddy," Emma announced when I emerged from the couch. "Better or worse?" My daughter considered the question with great seriousness. "Different." I caught Megan's eye across the kitchen. For the first time since that rainy night, she almost smiled. The days began to develop a rhythm. I went to work. Megan cleaned the apartment until it gleamed, then started on small repairs I'd been putting off for months. A squeaky cabinet hinge, a bathroom faucet that dripped. Tasks she said she'd learned from watching YouTube videos during long hours alone in her old house. Emma remained cautious, but her walls were developing cracks. One day, Megan found her drawing at the kitchen table and asked if she could sit down. "You're really good at this," Megan said, studying the crayon landscape Emma was creating. "Can you teach me?" Emma's eyebrows rose. It was clear that adults didn't usually ask children to teach them things. She handed Megan a blue crayon with the gravity of a surgeon passing a scalpel. "You have to stay inside the lines," Emma instructed, "but not too much. A little bit outside is okay because it makes it look more real." They drew together in silence for a while. Then Emma spoke, without looking up from her paper. "Miss Megan, do you have a mommy?" Megan's hand stilled over her drawing. "I did. She passed away a few years ago. My mommy went away too." Emma pressed harder with her yellow crayon, filling in a sun. "But she didn't die. She just left." The air in the room felt heavier. Megan searched for the right words and found none. Emma kept coloring. "Are you going to leave too?" Megan set down her crayon and turned to face the little girl. "I don't want to, but sometimes grown-ups have to do things they don't want to. That's what Daddy says about work. Your daddy is a smart man." Emma finally looked up. "If you stay, you can keep borrowing Mr. Buttons, but only if you stay." That evening, after Emma had gone to bed, Megan and I sat on the couch while rain tapped against the windows. A gentler rain than the storm that had brought her here, but rain nonetheless. She asked if I was going to leave, Megan said quietly. I nodded. She asked me that about everybody, the mailman, her teacher, Mrs. Henderson across the hall. What do you tell her? The truth. That some people stay and some people go, and we can't always control which is which. Megan turned to look at the silver bracelet still hanging from my keys on the hook by the door. I should have chosen you, Ryan. Back then, after prom, I was stupid to let us drift apart. We were kids, we didn't know anything. You knew enough to be kind. Her voice cracked slightly. I forgot what that felt like until now. We sat in the darkness, not touching, but closer than we'd been in years. Something unspoken passed between us, an acknowledgement of a road not taken that might finally have a second chance. One day I came home from work to find an unfamiliar car parked in front of my building. I noticed it immediately because I noticed everything about my surroundings now. A week of being on edge had sharpened my senses. I scanned the street, the sidewalk, the windows of my building. Nothing seemed out of place, but as I climbed the stairs to the third floor, I heard shouting, a man's voice, loud and angry, echoing through the hallway. "Megan, I know you're in there. Open the damn door." I took the remaining stairs two at a time. When I rounded the corner, I saw a man in an expensive jacket pounding on my apartment door. Broad shoulders, hands that looked like they knew how to hurt. Brandon, it had to be. "Hey," I kept my voice steady as I approached. "You need to leave." Brandon spun around. His face was red with rage, but there was something calculated in his eyes that told me this man was dangerous in more ways than one. "Who the hell are you?" Brandon demanded. "This is between me and my wife." "Not anymore. She's not going anywhere with you." Brandon stepped closer, close enough that I could smell alcohol on his breath. "You think you can take what's mine?" "She's not yours." I didn't back away. "She's not anybody's property. Now leave before I call the cops." Brandon shoved me hard in the chest. I stumbled backward but kept my footing. Every instinct screamed at me to fight back, to make this man understand with my fists what words couldn't convey. But I thought of Emma. I thought of the custody arrangement I'd fought for years to maintain. One assault charge, even in self-defense, could destroy everything. "You can hit me if you want," I said, my voice low and controlled. "But there's a camera right there." I pointed to the security camera mounted above the stairwell. "And my daughter is inside watching. You want to explain to a judge why you assaulted someone in front of a 6-year-old. Brandon's eyes flicked to the camera, then to the apartment door. Through the small window beside it, Emma's face was visible, her eyes wide with terror. Something shifted in Brandon's expression. The rage didn't disappear, but it retreated behind a mask of cold calculation. "This isn't over," he said quietly. The words meant only for me. "She belongs with me and she knows it." He turned and walked down the stairs, his footsteps echoing long after he disappeared. I waited until I heard the car engine start and pull away. Then I unlocked the door, with hands that were steadier than they should have been. Inside, Megan was pressed against the wall, trembling so violently she could barely stand. Emma hadn't moved from the window, her face pale and frozen. I went to my daughter first. I knelt down and wrapped my arms around her, feeling her small body shaking against my chest. "Daddy, that man was scary," she whispered. "I know, baby, but he's gone now. I won't let anyone hurt you ever." I held her until the shaking stopped, then carried her to the bedroom and tucked her in with Mr. Buttons. She clung to the bear like a lifeline, her eyes still too wide in her small face. When I returned to the living room, Megan had slid down the wall to the floor. Tears streamed silently down her cheeks. "I'm so sorry," she said. "I brought this to your door, to your daughter. This is exactly what I was afraid of." I sat down beside her on the floor. "How did he find you?" "Phone. He must have tracked it before I thought to turn off the location. I should have known. He always finds me." She buried her face in her hands. "I should leave tonight before he comes back." "And go where?" "I don't know. A shelter, the street, anywhere that's not here. Putting you and Emma in danger." I was quiet for a long moment. Then I reached over and gently pulled her hands away from her face. "You're not going anywhere tonight. We're going to lock the door, and tomorrow I'm going to figure out what our options are. But you don't run scared in the middle of the night. That's what he wants." Megan stared at me like I was speaking a language she'd forgotten how to understand. "Why are you doing this? You barely know me anymore." "I know enough." I stood and offered her my hand. "Come on, you need sleep." That night, I checked the locks multiple times. I wedged a chair under the front door handle. I lay awake on the couch, listening to every sound in the building, waiting for footsteps that never came. The days that followed were heavy with unspoken tension. I called in favors I didn't have, reaching out to everyone I knew for any kind of help. A coworker mentioned a lawyer who did pro bono work through a domestic violence shelter. I got the number and made an appointment, but at home things were fracturing. The stress was getting to me in ways I couldn't hide. My shifts felt longer. My patients felt shorter. The bills kept piling up. And now there was the added cost of worrying about security, about safety, about everything I'd been trying so hard to hold together. One night, Emma spilled her milk across the kitchen table. It soaked through her homework, turning careful pencil marks into gray smudges. Emma. My voice came out sharper than I intended, loud enough to make both Emma and Megan flinch. Can't you be more careful? The moment the words left my mouth, I wanted to take them back. Emma's face crumpled. She didn't cry, which was somehow worse. She just went very still, then slid off her chair and walked to her bedroom without a word. The door closed with a soft click that felt louder than any slam. I stood there staring at the spreading puddle of milk, hating myself. Megan silently got a towel and began cleaning it up. She didn't look at me, didn't say anything, and her silence was its own kind of judgment. Later, after the milk was cleaned and the apartment was quiet, I crept into Emma's room. She was curled on her side. Mr. Buttons clutched against her chest, her eyes closed, but her breathing too uneven for sleep. I sat on the edge of her bed and put my hand on her shoulder. "I'm sorry, baby," I whispered. "Daddy's just tired." "But that's not an excuse. I shouldn't have yelled at you." Emma didn't respond. Maybe she was asleep after all. Or maybe she just didn't have words for what she was feeling. I stayed there for a long time, my hand on my daughter's shoulder, wondering when I'd become the kind of father I'd promised myself I'd never be. The next morning, Megan was quieter than usual. She moved through the apartment like a ghost, avoiding eye contact with me. I knew what she was thinking because I was thinking it too. This wasn't working. Something had to give, but I didn't know what, and neither did she, so we said nothing and let the silence grow. One day I came home to find Megan on the phone speaking in hushed tones. She hung up quickly when she saw me. "Who was that?" "A shelter downtown. They have a bed available soon." I felt something cold settle in my chest. "You're leaving?" "I'm thinking about it." Megan couldn't meet my eyes. "Ryan, look at what's happening. You yelled at Emma. You haven't slept properly in days. You're falling apart and it's because of me. It's not because of you." "Then why?" She finally looked up, her eyes red-rimmed. "Why is everything falling apart?" I didn't have an answer. Maybe because everything had been falling apart long before she arrived, and her presence had just made it impossible to ignore anymore. That afternoon, Emma drew another picture. I found it on the kitchen table after my daughter had gone to bed. 2 stick figures inside a house. A third figure outside the door, back turned, walking away. I stared at it for a long time. Late one night, unable to sleep, I walked to the bedroom door and pushed it open a crack. Megan was awake, sitting up against the headboard, staring at nothing. Emma slept beside her, Mr. Buttons tucked under her chin. Megan saw me and put a finger to her lips. She carefully extracted herself from the bed and joined me in the hallway. "I saw Emma's picture," she said quietly. "So did I. She's waiting for me to leave." "She's already grieving it." I leaned against the wall. "What do you want to do?" "I don't know what I want anymore. I only know what I don't want." Megan's voice was barely audible. "I don't want to hurt that little girl. I don't want to hurt you. But staying seems to hurt everyone, and leaving seems to hurt everyone. And I don't know how to exist in a world where every choice causes pain." She was crying now, silent tears that she wiped away impatiently. "The shelter called back today," she continued. "They can take me if I want. They have resources, legal aid, job placement, everything I need to start over." "Is that what you want, to start over somewhere else?" Megan closed her eyes. "I want to not be a burden. For once in my life, I want to stand on my own 2 feet without dragging someone else down with me." I understood. I hated it. But I understood she wasn't running away from me. She was running toward something she'd never had, an identity that wasn't defined by the men around her. "If that's what you need," I said slowly, "then you should go." She opened her eyes. Something in them broke. You're not going to fight for me to stay? Is that what you want me to do? The question hung between us, unanswered and unanswerable. In the morning, I left for work before anyone else was awake. I couldn't face it. Couldn't face her. Couldn't face the goodbye that was coming, whether I wanted it or not. When I came home that evening, the apartment was quiet in a way that made my heart stop. Megan's few belongings were gone. Her shoes weren't by the door. The bathroom no longer held her toothbrush. On the kitchen table, I found a letter. Ryan, thank you for everything, but I can't keep doing this to you and Emma. You opened your door when no one else would. That means everything, but I have to find my own way now. Please tell Emma I'm sorry and that Mr. Buttons helped. Beside the letter on Emma's bed lay the worn teddy bear. Megan had given it back. I stood in the empty apartment, the letter crumpling in my fist. Then I heard a small voice from the hallway. She left. Emma stood in the doorway to her room, her face pale. I dropped the letter and went to my daughter. I knelt down in front of her, searching for words that wouldn't come. Daddy, Emma whispered. Why does everyone leave us? The question broke something open inside me. All the walls I'd built, all the careful distances I'd maintained, all the protection I'd wrapped around my heart to keep from being hurt again. None of it mattered. When my daughter looked at me with those eyes, I didn't have an answer. I'd never had an answer. But for the first time, I realized that maybe the answer wasn't about why people left. Maybe it was about fighting for them to stay. I stood in the middle of my apartment, my daughter's question echoing in my ears. Why does everyone leave us? I looked at Emma, at her small face that had learned too young to expect disappointment. I looked at the letter crumpled in my hand, at the teddy bear lying abandoned on the bed, and I made a decision. Baby, I need you to stay with Mrs. Henderson for a little while. I was already moving toward the door, grabbing my keys from the hook. The silver bracelet swung and caught the light. Emma's eyes went wide. Where are you going? To bring her back? I knelt down in front of my daughter, or at least to ask her to stay. The rest is up to her. What if she says no? I touched Emma's cheek gently. Then at least we tried. At least she'll know we wanted her here. I knocked on Mrs. Henderson's door, explained I had an emergency and was in my car soon after. The shelter. I could call them, find out if Megan had arrived, but something told me she hadn't gone there. Not yet. I thought about what she'd told me during those late-night conversations. Fragments of her past that she'd shared, like pieces of broken glass, careful not to cut either of us. Her mother, who died years ago, the park along the Chicago River where they used to go when Megan was young. Water helps wash away the bad thoughts, her mother used to say. I drove toward the river. The park was nearly empty in the fading afternoon light. A few joggers on the path, a man walking his dog, and there on a bench facing the water, a woman with a duffel bag at her feet. I parked and walked toward her, my footsteps crunching on the gravel path, loud enough that she heard me coming. She didn't turn around. I sat down on the bench beside her. The river moved slowly past us, brown and quiet. You should be with Emma, Megan said without looking at me. Mrs. Henderson's with her. She'll be fine for a while. Megan kept her eyes on the water. How did you know I'd be here? You told me about this place, about your mother. She nodded slowly, as if she'd forgotten she'd shared that piece of herself. I used to come here when I was a kid, whenever things got bad at home, before it got worse, before Brandon. She finally turned to look at me. Her eyes were red but dry. I can't keep being your problem, Ryan. You're not my problem. I held her gaze. You're my choice. The words hung in the air between us. Megan shook her head. You don't know what you're choosing. Brandon won't stop. He'll keep coming. He'll make your life hell. He'll use Emma against you if he can. I talked to that lawyer, the one from the shelter. I reached into my jacket and pulled out a business card worn at the edges from being handled too many times. She says we can file for a restraining order. It won't be quick and it won't be easy, but it's a start. Megan stared at the card, like it was written in a language she couldn't read. You did that? I did that for us. All three of us. There is no us, Ryan. There's you and Emma. And I'm just someone who crashed into your life because I had nowhere else to go. I turned on the bench so I was facing her fully. You want to know why I still have that bracelet, the one from prom? Megan didn't answer. Because it reminds me of the last time I let something good slip away without fighting for it. I was young and I thought I had all the time in the world. I thought if something was meant to be, it would just happen. I shook my head. I'm not that kid anymore, and I'm done waiting for things to just happen. What are you saying? I'm saying that my apartment is too small, my bank account is too empty, and I've got a little girl who's already had her heart broken once. I reached over and took Megan's hand. She flinched but didn't pull away. But she drew a picture this morning. You want to know what it was? Megan shook her head. 2 people in a house and a third person walking away. I squeezed her hand gently. She's already grieving you, Megan. She's already convinced herself you're gone. And when I asked her why everyone leaves, I didn't have an answer. I've never had an answer. I took a breath. But I'm tired of not having answers. I'm tired of letting people walk away because fighting for them is hard. Megan's composure finally cracked. Tears spilled down her cheeks and she didn't wipe them away. If you stay, I continued, we'll figure it out together. Not because I feel sorry for you, not because I owe you anything, but because I want you there. Emma wants you there. And maybe that's enough. Maybe that's all any of us can offer each other. What if it's not enough? Her voice was barely a whisper. What if I'm too broken? What if I can't be what you need me to be? I'm not asking you to be anything except yourself. The rest we figure out as we go. Megan looked back at the river. The sun was setting now, painting the water gold and orange. Okay, she said finally. I blinked. Okay, I'll stay. She turned to face me, and something in her expression had shifted. Not fixed, not healed, but different, lighter. But I'm paying rent as soon as I get a job. And I'm filing for divorce, and I'm not going to be some damsel you rescued. I'm going to stand on my own 2 feet, even if I have to learn how. I felt a smile tugging at the corner of my mouth. Deal. We sat there for a while longer, watching the sun sink below the horizon. Then I stood and offered her my hand. Come on, there's a little girl at home who needs to know you're not leaving. Megan took my hand and let me pull her to her feet. She picked up her duffel bag and followed me to the car. The drive back was quiet, but it was a different kind of quiet than before. Not heavy with unspoken words, but light with things that didn't need to be said. When we walked through the apartment door, Emma was sitting on the couch with Mrs. Henderson pretending to watch television, but her eyes went straight to Megan, wide and uncertain. Megan set down her bag and walked over to the couch. She knelt down so she was at eye level with Emma. I'm sorry I left, she said. That wasn't fair to you. Emma clutched Mr. Buttons tighter. Are you going to leave again? I don't want to, but I can't promise that bad things won't happen. I can only promise that I'll try my best to stay. Megan reached out and gently touched Emma's cheek. Is that okay? Emma considered this with the seriousness of a judge weighing evidence. Then she held out the teddy bear. You forgot Mr. Buttons. Megan took the bear and held it against her chest. Thank you for keeping him safe for me. That night, after Mrs. Henderson had gone home and Emma was asleep, Megan and I sat on the couch in the darkness. The apartment was still too small. The bills were still piled on the table. Nothing had really changed, and yet everything had. Thank you for coming to find me, Megan said quietly. Thank you for answering the phone that night. She leaned her head against my shoulder. I put my arm around her. Outside, the city hummed with its endless noise, but inside the apartment there was peace. Sometime later, Emma presented me with a new drawing, 3 stick figures inside a house, all of them smiling, and above the door, in careful crayon letters, one word, home. I looked at my daughter, then at Megan, who was washing dishes and humming a song I didn't recognize. Ordinary, simple, and perfect because of it. "This is beautiful, baby," I said. Emma nodded with complete confidence. "I know." That night, long after everyone should have been asleep, I stood at the window looking out at the city lights. Megan came up beside me. "There's still room, you know," I said softly. "Not just in the apartment." Megan took my hand and interlaced her fingers with mine. "I know," she said. Outside, the city sprawled endless and indifferent. But in one small apartment on the third floor, a light stayed on, a single point of warmth in the darkness, a family that had chosen each other, a home that had room enough for three. As I reflect on Ryan's story with Megan and little Emma in that cozy Chicago apartment, one powerful truth stands out that touches something deep inside all of us. Life often feels too small, too heavy, too full of struggles. The bills piling up, the fears whispering in the dark, the quiet ache from people who've walked away before. But the real lesson, the one that still brings tears to my eyes, is this. Sometimes the most beautiful thing we can do is make room anyway. Ryan didn't have much to give, yet when Megan's voice cracked through the phone on that stormy night, he chose to open his door, his home, and eventually his heart. He showed us that family isn't always about blood or perfect timing. It's about choosing each other even when it's messy and scary, about refusing to let someone slip away when they're broken, because fighting for them might just heal you both. That little girl's crayon drawings say it all. A home isn't defined by how much space you have, but by how much love you're willing to let in, even if it means giving up your bed, stretching every dollar, and facing the storms together. This story reminds me that we all have the power to be someone's safe place, to turn not enough into just right. Have you ever been the one who made room for someone or had someone fight to keep you close when everything felt impossible? Drop your thoughts and personal stories in the comments. I read every single one, and your words mean the world. If this touched your heart the way it touched mine, hit that subscribe button right now so you won't miss the next story that might feel like it was written just for you. We're building something special here, one heartfelt tale at a time. Thank you for staying with us until the end.